and I want to talk about Zootopia. The new Zootopia movie's coming out kind of soon, and Kat wanted to take me to it because of course she did. So she put on the first movie for me, which I have never seen. Zootopia is a really weird movie. That's the best way I can describe it. I knew that it was about race, and I knew that, like, some people had some issues with the way that the movie goes about its racial allegory, but having never seen it, I never had much of an opinion on it. And now having seen it, I don't think it's perfect. I actually think there's a lot of weird problems with it. So, one of the reasons it's weird is not just the allegorical stuff, but it's also because, in many ways, the movie actually isn't about race. I would say that a majority of the film is actually spent on stuff that has nothing to do with race and does not advance the main theme at all. Most of the movie is just a buddy cop story with no real, like, thematic additions to the racial themes. And then suddenly it's like at the beginning and at the end, like the first little bit of the movie, and then the climax kind of relies on the racial dynamics and stuff, but also it resolves it in a weird way. So Zootopia takes place in anthropomorphic animal land, anthro world, if you will. It takes place in Furcadia. Is that a deep reference? I don't know. The main character is Judy Hopps. She is a little bunny who lives in the city. She lives in the country. She's the country mouse, and she wants to be a city mouse. Denji man. So the biggest problem with the movie is actually, it's weird to talk about the film to like start explaining the synopsis, because the worst part of the movie is the first scene, because it kind of like fucks a lot of the shit up and frames it in a really strange way. So in this world, there are predators and prey, like, you know, in the animal kingdom. And at the start of the movie, it's the first scene where you're getting exposition on the way the world works, and it's kind of setting up the basic racial, not racial conflict of the world, which is that predators used to rule over prey. They used to terrorize them. But now they've learned to chill out and not eat meat. And now they all live together in peace and happiness. And okay, so I'm just going to jump right into it. So at the start of the movie, I was absolutely certain that because of the way it was framed, that the prey animals were supposed to be minorities. Because the idea that they would be not that was a little absurd to me. It didn't even occur until much, much later in the film. Because, okay, this is a play, right? It's a story in the universe. But then there's a scene right afterwards, during this whole flashback thing, where baby Judy Hopps goes to help some other bunnies or whatever who are being picked on by an older bully who is a predator animal. He's like a fox. I think he's a fox. And she helps him, and he fucking she fights back against him, and he swipes her and cuts her. And it's oh my God, can you believe the oppression of these predator animals? Look at these backwards ideas that he still subscribes to, unlike our hero, Judith Hopps. So here's the problem. The predators are the minority, and the prey are the majority group. And that makes shit super fucking weird. It makes it super weird. It completely reframes the start of the movie in my mind. Essentially, the way it begins is, let's just cut the shit. Don't quote this out of actually, please quote this out of context. Predators are black people and prey are white people. So the start of the movie is Judy Hopps, a white girl, puts on a play where that is about how black people, the scary black people, used to oppress the poor, innocent white people. But now the black people are evolved enough to not be so savage. You know, they learned to be civilized. And now we all live in harmony. And then afterwards, so this is like this is like literally birth of a nation. This is birth of a Zootopia. Afterwards, Judy Hopps then goes and, yeah, like that Fox guy was bullying those kids. But then she she's just put on a play where she's been talking to this Fox kid who's in the audience about how his people, his class group, used to be violent savages, and now thankfully they've evolved enough to live with the rest of civilized people. And actually, that not only that, but Judy Hopps wants to be a cop. That's so crazy. Actually, I want to be a cop too. Not only, I want to be a cop so badly that I'm going to be the first rabbit police officer in Zootopia. Like, she is... Dude, like, do you see why this is weird? Do you see why this is weird? It's weird because, as an allegory, like, okay, I get certain aspects. I was talking to a friend about this, and I get certain aspects of the allegory. Like how, despite the fact that everyone claims that everybody gets along, there's still a lot of racial bias, but you know what I mean. Racial bias and stuff like that exists in this world. The main villain is trying to basically make all the predators go feral so that they can justify like locking them up and like causing social discord. I'll talk about that in a second. Like there's still these issues. But like when you do an allegory like this, I need a little bit more history, because like real racism in the real world is not like genetic. I think that this is like a little bit important, and I think it's surprising that I didn't learn about this until very recently. But like whiteness and blackness were concepts that were created by newly christened white slave owners so that they could justify having slaves. Because most of their slaves, have I talked about this before? It used to be that you couldn't, many Christian countries had laws where you couldn't own slaves who were Christians. So most slaves were Muslim. A lot of slaves came from Africa, where they were, a lot of them were Muslim or belonged to various regional religions. And then eventually, at a certain point in like the 1600s, when religious conversion became a more widely known thing, and it was kind of became more common to convert people from one religion to the other, that presented a threat to the economic like slave working force of landowners, of like Christian landowners. And so they were like, fuck, we have to come up with a new category to separate our slaves from us. And the most obvious one was like visual. So let's just say that we're white and they're black. That's where like modern white-black racism comes from. The concept of being white is inherently like it's an idea, it's a concept. It's not like saying that someone is Asian, because that's like an objective fact. They or their family are primarily from the Asian continent. and we all generally agree where Asia is, right? Whiteness is an idea. It's just a concept. People get that's why Irish weren't considered white. That's why Italians weren't considered white, because like those fuckers didn't own slaves. They were in like the case of the Irish, they were the ones being exploited. So why would we let them into the in group with the special privileges? And I think, again, to reiterate, that dynamic exists to reinforce, like, for economic reasons. It was to reinforce, it was to reinforce the power of, like, owners on people in the land that they owned. And like this is where real racism comes from, which is why it's really, really weird that Zootopia frames racism as, well, first of all, okay, you run into this problem because in real life, it's like a good thing that predators exist and eat meat. Like, realistically, Zootopia should have a horrible overpopulation issue. Predators serve to keep populations in check. Predators gotta eat. I thought it was funny that there's this trailer that we get for some. Is it a Pixar movie that's coming out? I forget what it's called. But it's like this girl who gets her brain put into a beaver, and she's like running around in the wild. And the little bit of the twist is she learns that like nature isn't like the happy-go-lucky magical world that she thought. And there's like a scene where there's a bear that's trying to eat another beaver, and she saves the beaver, and both of them, are the bear and the beaver she saved, are like, dude, why did you do that? And she's like, what? She was gonna eat you. And the beaver's like, I mean, she's got to eat something. She's gonna starve? Like, this is just how nature works. This is just how things work. And she's applying her fallacy, and the joke is that she's applying a human perspective onto, like, basically a whole world she doesn't live in. And that's kind of what Zootopia does. Like, it's really strange because, yes, predators they have to be the minority in the ecosystem. The energy has to flow up to the top. They aren't like tyrannical. They keep things in balance. Which is why, like, so two things that I took away when really thinking hard about the allegory in Zootopia. Number one is that this would work much better as a class allegory, but maybe we're not woke enough for that. This would work much better as a class allegory. Just the dynamic on its own. It still wouldn't be perfect. I think it's still, again, weird to do this with the natural kingdom, but the idea that they're the animal kingdom, the idea that there is a small group of people for whom all of the resources flow up towards, to the detriment of, the lives of the people below them who make up the majority, works way better as a class allegory. It's almost completely inverted as a racial allegory, which leads me to the second thing, which is that this movie makes perfect sense. The allegory fits perfectly if Judy Hopps is a Yakubian devil. If you are of the belief that 10,000 years ago, there was a black scientist named Yakub who created white people in a lab, and then the evil white people rose up and overthrew the black people to then rule the world with white supremacy, you are gonna love the allegory in Zootopia. It's gonna rock. It's gonna rock your cocks off. But yeah, seriously, like, okay, the other weird thing is that misled me is there's like an N-word joke that comes from Judy. She gets to the police station and there's like what is he, a leopard guy at the desk, and he calls her cute, which is kind of demeaning. But she says, oh, well, rabbits can call other rabbits cute, but it's kind of weird if other animals say that to about a rabbit. And I was like, it's a funny joke, but it's clearly like an N-word joke, right? Like that there is no other real world thing that you could apply that to. And it's framing Judy as the black person, which is why it totally took me off guard when, no, she is a member of the majority group. The movie's just got a lot of weird shit like that, where if you think a little too hard about it or know a little bit too much about the real world, it starts to get really awkward. I imagine that if you're like a child watching it or you don't think that hard, it probably makes sense. Or like you're like, yeah, racism's bad, which is just like the moral of the movie. Sure, it's for families. You don't have to get so crazy about how, like, that's the other thing, is that there isn't, like, I feel like there's a limited view into the institutional nature of the bias against predators in this world. I kind of just wish I had more info, but unfortunately, the movie, again, just spends the bulk of its runtime being a buddy cop story and not really talking about the racism at all. And what's weird is that all that stuff is actually really good. I think that the allegorical aspect of the film is easily its weakest part. It has the most holes in it, and it rings the most hollow to me. It doesn't feel very well thought out. But a lot of other aspects of this movie are actually pretty great. It's a Disney movie, so it looks really good. I say of course, but Wish exists, and that movie looks like ass. But the movie looks very good. I think that the setting is really fun. There's a bunch of ways in which I have questions about how it works with all the different climates that they have in one city, but fuck it, I don't care that much. It's just visually cool to have, here's the jungle biome area, here's the snowy area, here's the desert Sahara area. That stuff's neat. They live in, what is it? TikTok Woods? Click Clock Woods? What's that level from Banjo-Kazooie? They live there. The visual design of the way that the setting has to account for all the different animals and little background, I wouldn't even call them gags. They're just little background details of, like, the hippo gets to work and they swim through the water. So there's a little air blow dryer on the floor where they get out that dries them off before they head to work. Like, that stuff's fun. I think that a lot of the movie does a lot of fun things with the animal theming and the fact that every character is an animal who has to move around the world in a different way and might need different accommodations, might need different sizes of things. Tons of puns. I do like the puns in the background. There's tons and tons of puns for background shots, and that stuff's a lot of fun. Little background details. The dynamic between Judy and Nick is pretty fun. It's a pretty classic buddy cop thing where she's the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, not to be speciesist, not to make an anti-bunny microaggression, but she is a bushy-tailed new recruit. She has a strong sense of what needs to be done, and we're gonna do this. And I want to be the super cop. I want to be the most cop ever. But obviously she's naive and she isn't that experienced with the world. She comes from the countryside. Contrasted to Nick, he's been around the block a few times. He was sort of born being kind of an outsider. He's a Deleuzian pervert, if you will. He basically decides that whatever he needs to do to get his way, he's going to do it. He doesn't care. Which manifests in the form of running sort of little scams on people and stuff like that. They go out of their way to not make him too scummy, but that's kind of the implication, Buying stuff and reselling. He's like a drop shipper. He's a popsicle drop shipper. And they have a fun dynamic. The way that their friendship progresses is neat. It is crazy when you get to the scene towards the back half where Judy just goes like super race realism on Nick about how predators are biologically more dangerous. One of the really weird things that I kept thinking about, which Kat had never seen, was the clip from the 90s, I think, of Hillary Clinton talking about black people and calling black gang members super predators. Like that, I kept thinking about. She just specifically described them as people with no conscience. Like savage animals with no conscience. Kat had never seen that clip. And just like, I don't know if I was supposed to think about that while watching Zootopia, but it is really weird to watch that scene with that in mind. And, yeah, oh, so there's the best scene in the movie is one where they go to the DMV and they talk to the sloth. When it first started, I was like, all right, this is parent bait. I remember seeing this in the trailers, and it's clearly a joke that's there to, because, oh, haha, you know, parents, we've all been adults, we've all been to the DMV before, and oh, aren't they so slow? And then it's actually like the funniest scene in the movie. I gotta give it up. I didn't have faith. That was my mistake. I didn't have faith. I should have trusted you, Zootopia writers. I should have trusted you to write a really funny DMV scene, because it is, it feels like a Monty Python sketch, to be honest, where it's like, how long can we drag the joke out? But that's part of the joke. It feels like that. The villain of the movie is very weak and strange. She's a little sheep who wants to... she's just like a super racist. Her motivation is that she's just a super racist. I won't say that she like doesn't make any sense in the context. Oh, I'm getting a call. Whoa. All right, where was I? The sheep. I was talking about the twist villain, the kind of weak twist villain of this movie. So, she sort of comes out of nowhere. The whole mystery of the film is it's like, okay, there's this otter who's gone missing. There's, and eventually they stumble across this plot where animals or this thing, this phenomena where predator animals are going savage. They're going crazy. You know, they're reverting back to their, you know, before the white man gave them books and stuff and Shakespeare and Greek philosophy. They're going like that, you know? And this is the big reveal is that this is all being caused by the vice mayor or the assistant mayor of the city, who wants to make all the predator animals savage to basically spark a race war, I guess, to get to stoke fears that predators can't be trusted, and that so that I guess they'll run all the predators out. So she's like a hyper racist, I guess. And I say she's a weird villain because I think that, in a way, like I said, the theme of being like anti-racist isn't that strong in the movie. In a sort of detached way it is, because it is two people from two different groups, which are the racial analogs, coming together and learning to be friends. You know, Judy's told before she leaves, that foxes can't be trusted and stuff like that. And then, oh, who does she make friends with? A fox. Although she never like actually distrusts foxes. Funny enough. So it is two people from these two different groups learning that they can be friends, but they don't start with any particular prejudices against each other. And so, I don't know, I guess it leaves like the villain looking kind of stupid. it also just sort of happens. It really feels like it just happens like the writers were like, oh, right, we need to make a villain. So she shows up and then she reveals her plot and they stop her because of the thing that they set up with the recording device that catches her. And then she's caught. And then the movie ends and it's like, racism's bad. Okay, all right. Not the strongest villain in the world. I kind of wish the movie was a little more clear in one direction or the other. If you're going to have the allegory, I wish that it was a little stronger and that it actually leaned into that. Like, hey, you know what does it really well? Of Orcs and Men from 2012, I think. Which is a story that I wouldn't say, it's not really about racism as much as it is about race broadly, although racism is a large component of that. And it's really important to the plot. But that's a story that uses non-humans as allegories for, not exactly, there isn't like a direct allegory. I'm using the word allegory a lot. They're using non-humans as representations. The word I used before was shorthand. Like, you kind of get the gist of how orcs and goblins and elves and fantasy humans work in a lot of traditional Tolkien-derived Western fantasy. And the game doesn't throw any huge curveballs. It's not trying to be subversive. That's kind of the point. These are very archetypal, for the most part, depictions of these fantasy races. And it says, okay, you basically know the dynamics of these. Here's how they interact and here's how they think about their race compared to others, right? And that game has some like really, really biting storytelling and moments. Like some of the depictions of racism, some of the conflicts within members of the same race about loyalty to your identity and your culture and stuff. There's some really compelling stuff. And basically everything that happens in the game furthers that narrative. It furthers the story of Arkai and Styx and how they feel about being an orc and a goblin. And each other, right? Styx is I think a really interesting character for most of the game. And yeah, like the game does kind of sputter out near the end when they hit the budget wall, the budget ice wall. But I think overall it still tells a very solid story that a lot of like allegorical race stories kind of fail to, where they kind of, I saw someone once say that in fantasy stories, the difference between fantasy and sci-fi is whether or not black people are monsters or robots. And unfortunately, I think a lot of writers fall into that trap. I think that there's a lot of writers who are kind of geeky and white, and they're very self-conscious about the fact that they are geeky and white. And so when they write a story about race, or they feel compelled to, they almost like try to protect themselves by putting something a little more familiar. They put like a bit more of there's a layer in between them and the real subject matter, the story and the real subject matter. So they're like, oh, black people, they're minorities, they're like aliens or robots or orcs or something like that. And it can just cause some weird things. It's just like, white people get to be humans. Human beings, even if they're other races, even if they're other colors in the story, they represent the majority group. And like, obviously you're thinking about like, how were you supposed to think about that? And I think that's where a lot of them get kind of awkward, and Zootopia falls into the same trappings. I think that there's just generally an issue with using non-human characters as stand-ins for real human identity groups in a lot of it's really tricky, and I think that if you're going to make them like very close stand-ins, one of the benefits that of orcs and men has, one of the things it has going for it, is that they don't make the orcs any really particular group. There are many different groups throughout history that you could compare them to and say, oh yeah, well there's many ethnic racial group from the north invades racial ethnic group to the south for imperialist conquest, makes them slaves, has them build a wall, a border wall. That could apply to a lot of things throughout history. And that's something that you can start talking about after you get through maybe the primary thing. It doesn't feel like there's any allegory. The allegory is almost a secondary thing. The primary thing is, how do we think about race? And I guess that's how Zootopia, how it falls. I wouldn't say I love the movie. There's several parts of it that I enjoyed quite a bit. But, I just find the writing weirdness too distracting to really give it a thumbs up. It's just, I get why people like it, but I just can't really see past the shortcomings of the story and its metaphor.